Hello. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to be talking about multiplication with decimals. And multiplication with decimals, again, works very similarly mechanically to multiplying with whole numbers. We've got a couple different things with our method, though. So we're going to talk about our method of multiplying. We're also going to talk a little bit about powers of 10, because those powers of 10, we can take some very big numbers and just use, apply some simple logic to help us find answers. Well, first thing that we're going to do, the main thing with this, one thing to pay attention to is that you do not need to line up your place values. U-E-S. You don't need to line up your place values, which means I can take something like, take a number like, say, 1.5 and multiply this by, say, by a 3. Now what's going to happen here is, notice that here I've got my tenths right over my ones. Well, that's not going to change anything. When I multiply these two numbers, I'm going to go ahead and multiply my numbers as normally. So here I've got 3 times 5 is 15. 3 times 1 is 3, plus that 1 is going to be 4. So I've got a 45 so far. Next thing that we're going to do is we're going to count our total number of our place values, or of our decimal places. So here I've got just one decimal place from that and none from this. So I've got one decimal place. And what we're going to do is we're going to place that number of decimal places in our answer. So that means with only one decimal place, this is going to be 4.5. Let's do that again. Say I've got something like 0.86. I'm going to multiply this one by 0.9. Now, just to start off with, notice I've got 1, 2, 3 decimal places. So, and looking at that, I've got 1, 2, 3 decimal places. Okay. Now I'll go ahead and multiply as I normally would. 9 times 6 is going to be 54. 9 times 8 is 72. Plus that 5 is going to be 77. Now, if I were to move on to this next place value, I would have a 0, which means I would have an entire row of zeros down here, which wouldn't actually add anything. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put these 3 decimal places into my answer. So I start from the right, and I start moving left. So that would be 1, 2, 3 decimal places right there. And when we do this, just to let you know, we usually put a 0 in front of our decimal point if I don't have any whole numbers there. This helps us keep track of where that decimal point is. It's easy to lose track of it without a leading 0. And the reason why we're doing this, if you wanted the reason why behind this, it's because of how these numbers work. So thinking about this, this 0.86 times this 0.9, what's happening here is we've got 86 over 100, then times this 9/10. So that's 86 hundredths, well that's 86 hundredths times over 9/10. When I multiply those two numbers together, I end up with 774, and 100 times 10 is 1,000. So now I've got 774 thousandths, which, as if I were to do this would turn into 0.774, 774 thousandths. So that's the reason why this works. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about our powers of 10. And when we're talking about powers of 10, we're going to find some interesting things. But let's talk about the effect first. Our powers of 10. Let's say I've got a number like 1.77245. And if I were to multiply this by 10, anytime I multiply by a power of 10, all we're going to do is move our decimal point. So with this, the decimal point moves to the right. So this is going to become 17.7245. If I were to multiply this by 100, instead of here, this only moves one place. Notice that moved one place. Say I were to multiply this by 100, so 1.77245. By 100, I've got two place values that this is going to move. This is going to move 2 spaces. So this is going to turn into 177.245. If I were to multiply this by 1,000, it moves 1, 2, 3 place values. So that's going to be 1.77245. This would turn into 1,772.45. So all we're doing when we multiply by a power of 10 is moving our decimal place further and further to the right. Well, something similar happens if I multiply by another type of power of 10. So say I've got this 1.77245, and I were to multiply this by 0.1. This is 1/10. Instead of moving our decimal point to the right, my decimal point is going to move left. So this is going to turn into 0.17745. All I'm doing basically is adding one more decimal place in here. So that's going to just move that to the left one. Okay, well, let's do it again. 1.77245. And if I were to multiply this by 0.01, by 100th, this is just going to move that decimal place 2 spaces out. And I would have to actually add on a leading zero in order to do that, not a trailing zero. So 1.77245. So notice that these powers of 10, all they do is shift where our decimal place is going to sit. Okay, hopefully this makes some sense for you. If you have any questions, shoot me a message, and I'll see you in the next video.